Okay, muy buenos días. Good afternoon to everyone here in Chile and other countries, especially in Eastern Europe. My name is Crispulo Marmolejo, and I'm a professor of law at Pontifical Catholic University of Valparaiso Law School in Chile. I would like to thank you, all of you, for your presence and connection for this interesting conversation today. Today, we have the honor and the privilege to have invited Professor Dr. Maciej Bernat, who is a distinguished scholar in the fields of economic law, regulation, and antitrust law. We expect to have a conversation about his latest book entitled Populism and Antitrust, the Liberal Influence of Populist Government on the Competition Law System, published by Cambridge University Press. Dr. Bernat is a professor of the University of Warsaw, the director of the Center for Antitrust and Regulatory Studies at the Faculty of Management of the University of Warsaw, and the head of the Department of European Economic Law. He is the editor-in-chief of the Yearbook of Antitrust and Regulatory Studies and the co-director of the Eastern Europe chapter of ASCOLA. Professor Bernat is the author of many specialized articles on economic law, European competition, and constitutional law. He has recently published a book entitled Populism and Antitrust, the Liberal Influence of Populist Government of the Competition Law System. Dear Bernat, thanks for being here through the screens by Zoom and our YouTube channel. It's a great honor having you here. For now, virtually in our lab school. We hope to see you very soon here personally in Chile, and in the brief time we hope. So before
thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. Honored, really. Thank you for your invitation.
So you're very welcome. So before this conversation, we'd like to explain some of the reason for this activity and to highlight the relevance of our guest, Professor Bernat. First of all, many of us probably know that competition law, antitrust law, is changing in many countries due to several reasons. We can mention the breaking, or at least the shaking of many concepts or topics that build a well-established tradition of principles or values supported upon a wide economic and legal consensus. For example, we can think about the huge debate about the consumer welfare standard in the United States and in part of Europe now. Secondly, the expansion of digital markets and the treatment and analysis by different competition agencies about digital platforms. We can say many things about the reports generated in the European context, but it seems that these reports are a new source of competition law, or at least they are making a huge influence to get a better understanding of digital market economy. Third, the current European discussion about the draft of the DMA, Digital Markets Act, a process in which we found recently, maybe a few weeks ago, a primary political consensus about the main topics of the regulation. Fourth, the current tension between two perspectives, one that advocates for a stronger economic analysis, more and better microeconomics can build a better competition law, and another approach that proposes more goals for competition law, and also a more challenging study for the study of traditional focus of this legal field. This tension, I think, is an effect of the current debate between neo-Brandisians on traditional pro-market advocates. The current question could be how this debate will influence the national evolution, the national systems of competitions, in our case in Latin America. So in this international scenario, Professor Maciej Bernat publishes a very interesting and clear exposition in his brand new book, Populism and Antitrust. I would like to invite you, all of you, to read this book. I think it's a great piece of understanding, not only for the very state of the art of European competition law. I think it's a very strong work that combines the expertise of Professor Bernat in constitutional law, economic law, regulation, and antitrust law. I think that this book is a great opportunity to swim in a new ocean. Few authors and scholars can combine with elegance, efficiency, and intellectual strength a very attractive analysis of the influence of a political phenomenon, the populism, and a technical, legal, microeconomic field as the competition law. For all these reasons, we are very pleased to have here Professor Maciej Bernat this afternoon for this conversation. Well, so in the beginning, Maciej, we would like to know the basics, the foundations. So please tell us about some of the reasons that encouraged you to write this book. So welcome to Chile virtually.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Again, I'm very happy to be with you, and I'm very happy to be able to talk about my book. I've never swim in Pacific Ocean, at least not on the Chilean side, but maybe one day this will happen. So thank you once again. So coming back, what brought me to write this book? So I'm living in a Central European countries, a country of Poland that since 2015 is going through a political change. Many scholars, many observers argue that democracy, liberal democracy got weakened, that we observe a process of democratic backsliding, and Poland is arguably not the only place of this kind in the world. In Central Europe, Hungary is another example that is very much discussed within the European Union. So I was living in this country. I was observing this changing surrounding, this changing environment. It's in fact not only about a political system, but also a broader economic system. And I was wondering what influence these changes that are taking place within the surrounding of the competition law system have on the antitrust law, the way it is applied. So that was kind of a starting point, and the discussion, I think, before my book was conducted mostly by constitutional law and EU law scholars. There was less of the interest among economic legal scholars, basically. So I was also trying to fill in this gap by studying competition law system. So this would be my short answer.
Okay, I was muted, so sorry. So because when we read the first part of your book, we can see in a face, we can see a Dr. Maciej Bernat like a political scientist. So we can agree that this combination of a highlighted scholar in antitrust law and at the same time, a very wise professor in constitutional law, in this field is not so usual, but it's very appropriate in order to study the phenomenon of populism. How do you get the right balance between the political focus and the microeconomics focus or technical focus of the competition law? How do you get it?
Well, I think this is a difficult question. I think this is more for my readers to assess what's the final result. But clearly, competition law is as you are saying, technical, specialized area of law where economics has an important role to play. However, I wouldn't see maybe my book as a work that is written within the field of law and economics. so it's that I would say that for me, in this book, it was more. I was more interested in the intersections between politics, constitutional law, and competition law. Obviously, in the book, you will find a big section that deals with actual enforcement of competition law, and there you may raise some economic questions. And in fact, when I was studying some of the cases, I was trying to understand whether, for example, the decisions of competition authorities are founded within the existing law and whether they are supported by persuasive evidence. So, and sometimes I had doubts in this respect, what could possibly situate a given decision within a broader kind of political problem and link it to the questions related to independence of competition agencies. So I was on one hand there was this broader view, but on the other hand I believe that in terms of actual decision making, competition authorities' decision needs to be based within the limits of law, and in the context of competition law, the economic evidence, the fact that a given practice could have affected market, that's something that is very important.
So you are the director of a center who studies topics on regulation, at the same time competition. Do you see in your current analysis that the difference between the regulatory analysis and the competition analysis, it has been influenced by the populist intervention? I mean, sometimes we can see that antitrust law is one field and regulatory studies are other fields. Do you think that the influence of the populist government and the populist habits could influence to get a closer distance between competition and regulations?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so in my book, I guess my findings they can be relevant for sector specific regulation like telecommunication, energy, for example, sector. But maybe for my book it was more important, like in the what you will find in section 1, a broad introductory part of my book. You will see that I argue that the changes in the way in which the state perceives economic regulation can be a factor that influences the functioning of competition law system. And what we observe in Central Europe, it is not related to each and every sector of the economy, but in some sectors of the economy, you clearly see a growing role of state, and not only in terms of economic regulation, because I think this is something we can discuss, we can agree, disagree to the extent of the need for state intervention within the economy. But yes, what I see is also the processes of concentration within the economy that involve state as an owner, and in particular state-owned enterprises. So what we might observe, and this is linked to the topic of national champions, is a possible cumulation of political and economic power. And once you have a situation when the rule of law and checks and balances are weakened, So there are the safeguards against abuse of power by state are more limited. This kind of mixture of all these factors is creating the environment that is in my view possibly hostile for the functioning of the competition law system. So it's about answering to your question. It's more about economic regulation, maybe in a broader sense. If you ask me about sector specific regulation, I think you can maybe prepare or write or think about another study that would look how sector specific regulation is changing, and again here for me the topic and in the EU there are in the secondary law, in the directives, the requirements concerning the independence of regulatory bodies. So this is something that would be indeed very interesting to observe whether in practice agencies responsible for regulation of telecommunication, energy market, railway, etc., whether they are independent. So this would be a topic that maybe could be developed in line with my approach proposed in the book.
Yes, I think so. So, okay, in the second part of the book, regarding the impact of populism and in antitrust law, so you make an structure that is divided in variables, institution, and enforcement. I mean, this is the general scheme of the book. But in relation to the first topic, you argue that there is a general factor. So the extent of dismantling checks and balances and the rule of law. And this reason can lead, according to the book, to the re-evaluation of the free market economic model. So do you think that the current European scenario is facing now the danger of deep doubt about the market economy? I mean, because 30 years ago, especially 1991, from this part of the world, we used to see the Eastern European countries as the new oasis for the free market reforms. So everything is changing now, in your opinion?
No, I wouldn't say that everything is changing. Well, so yes, indeed, in my book, I build this conceptual framework using two variables, and one of these variables is dismantling of checks and balances and rule of law, and the other one is kind of reevaluation of economic policies. What this processes I already mentioned concerning the concentration of economic power that brings state at the forefront of the economy, and also some patriotic, so to say, tendencies. So a growing discussion, and you can hear politicians underlying that, let's say, a product produced in Poland should be promoted, and maybe it's better because of the fact that it is Polish than, let's say, a German product. So whereas the European Union is based on the idea that there shouldn't be any discrimination based on the nationality, and this applies also to goods, services, capital, etc. So you see this two processes taking place. I see them. They are interconnected, but I think it is possible that only one of them will materialize while the other will not. So it is when I argue when both of them will materialize, this is the worst scenario for competition law system, and I am describing this situation as a deconstruction scenario. So on this checks and balances and rule of law side, for example, if you think about problems or legal reforms that undermine the independence of judiciary, this may have effect on judicial review in competition law. This is probably the clearest example. On the other hand, if you think about this second variable, that more related to economy, let's imagine that nationalizations of certain markets is taking place, or let's imagine that by means of law, the powers of competition authority in relation to enforcement of competition law in a given sector of economy are limited. So this is a situation where you have a certain change in economic policies that affect that affects the competition law system. So this would be my answer to the first part of your question. The second one, it's I think you are asking me what was going on in these post-communist countries that, in 1989, Central and Eastern Europe, Soviet Union collapsed, and this not fully independent or not independent countries, like the so-called satellites of Soviet Union, like Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, Romania, and others, they went through the reforms that involved at the same time embracing liberal democracy and liberal economy. And that was this spirit during the 90s that we are reforming. We are going west. We are changing our political system. We are changing our economic system. I am not an expert of Latin America. I'm not an expert of Chile, but I arguably, at least when it comes to this political side, I think that Chile went through similar transformation process. And what's going on now? So what I argue in my book, what I'm describing in my book, is this process of, I think this word backsliding is kind of describing these processes that are taking place in a good manner. So certain level of development of liberal democracy and certain level of development of free market economy was reached, and certain processes are taking place that are making this achievement sort of so there is this backsliding. There is, I wouldn't say that this is, because this would be maybe too simplistic to say that we are coming back to the communist past, but it's you see that the liberal democracy, for example, the role of constitutional tribunal, both in Hungary and in Poland, very strong constitutional tribunals ready to find unconstitutionality of statutes, even in big cases, really a very, very assertive courts. Arguably right now they are captured. They are not anymore, in particular in this high profile cases, they are not playing the role that they should play under the constitution. So that's one problem. In case of changes in the economy, I think that's, as I said, this is more related to a given sector of economy, and in some sectors of the economy, I think they are working according to free market paradigm. But there are some sectors of economy where state is increasingly present as a private entity very often, but you see SOEs being very much connected in practice to the ruling government, and one can have doubts if they are acting really as a economic or economic interest driven private entities, right? There is the role of state is very important, and for example, in case of Poland, you see a national champion, a producer of petrol and the owner of petrol stations that is entering the new markets that this company was never earlier present. So, for example, it recently bought local media outlets, while an oil-producing company is entering the media market. You may have doubts if this is really kind of economic-driven decision, or maybe there are some other political reasons. And clearly this firm has a huge capital. And the question is, for example, whether this concentration that took place, whether it was assessed to a sufficient extent by the competition authority, and whether certain processes that are taking place on the market, that they may also have an influence for the state of democracy. So I think media market is quite interesting case in this respect to think of.
And of course, in the current context of digital markets and the transformation of all the medias in digital platforms, is pretty interesting. So regarding to the role of the state that you mentioned in the book, from my personal experience, a couple of years ago, I wrote a book about regulatory agencies, Maciej. In this book, I tried to compare many institutional designs in search of which one the best model of independence of autonomy in Europe. So regarding our current constitutional process in Chile, the topic of independence and autonomy is again on the carpet. And in your book, you express a concern about the negative perception of this autonomy in the populist context. So can you explain to us this very deep idea? Is populism maybe the end or the final step for this kind of successful, I think, independent institutional agencies or institutional designs in Europe, or maybe in North America, kind of countries in Latin America?
Yes, so that the topic of independence is clearly was very important to me. So maybe to start with, so I see, because there is this word populism that I think it can be understood in different ways, and so for me, populism is, or the rule of populist government is a possible driver of change in the democracy and in the economy. This process may take place according to these variables, these mechanisms we already discussed. I don't, as I said, I don't feel like, I know that you are not asking me this to assess the situation as it is going right now in Chile. By the way, I am very much interested in the constitutional process, that is like the process of drafting a new constitution in Chile. But there is a tension, I would say, between, on one hand, safeguarding independence of regulatory agencies, competition agencies, and safeguarding accountability of these agencies. And I guess in different countries you can strike a balance in a different way. But the problem may materialize when within the surrounding of the competition law system I am discussing, there are these processes of weakening of liberal democracy. So what I want to say that you may have similar rules concerning independence of agencies in country like Germany and in country like Poland. I'm not saying that they are the same, but this is just an example. But the context within, or the culture within which the agencies operate, are very different. So maybe in one country you will need to strike this balance in one way, in the other country in a slightly different way. When I was looking at these countries that go through this process of democratic backsliding, I also observed the processes which arguably may suggest that the agency are less, or are becoming less independent than they were in the past, and very often a system of political model of appointment of agency heads is kind of a starting moment that then brings changes, and so you see even sometimes like attrition of staff. People are leaving the agency is weakened, and then the question about the independence, when I was trying to kind of look in practice how it operates, it's not only about these possible scenarios that actually I didn't find that many examples that you have a competition agency being used as a tool by the ruling government, let's say, for example, to attack a firm that this government dislikes. What I find quite interesting is a problem of self-restraint. So you may have certain firms or certain sectors, the agency is working in this new, more hostile environment, and it is not ready to open some cases. So you may have an agency still existing, still operating, but not ready to really go after, let's put it in a colloquial manner, to go after big fish, basically. So you may have this the most important sectors of economy, or you may have the most important firms in the economy, and you don't necessarily see the enforcement related to these areas of economy. So you may have changes in the legal system that concerning the safeguards of the independence, but even without maybe changes in law, you may have the effect when the actual independence of the agency is changing. Maybe this is a kind of a survival strategy, but I was talking about this with Eleanor Fox, and she was asking me a question. Okay, even if it is a sort of a survival strategy, but then the question is, what really the benefit we have from a competition agency that is just doing something, but doing quite little, and maybe there are people there is staff there are still some resources there that are not used. So this is maybe not the construction scenario, but the other scenarios like a marginalization or atrophy scenario I am discussing in my book. By the way, in my book I also refer to Venezuelan experience, and obviously Venezuela is
yes,
the most farthest reaching, and this is not, the situation that is taking place in Central Europe, but these changes can have a more subtle character.
So it's pretty interesting, your point. So, and what about the extension of the agency's mandate? If you can see the current debate between neo-brandicians and, the more industrial organization or technical scholars in the United States, the tension about the goals of the antitrust law is there. So it seems that the antitrust law is not only for the efficiency of markets or the balance between efficiency and consumer welfare standard. So Tim Gu, the author, argues that the antitrust law now must focus to make democracy stronger and other things. I would like to know your opinion about the relation between this debate and the extension of the mandate of competition agencies. What do you think about this kind of debates and between the pretension of to extend the mandate of regulatory or competition agency for democracy and other things?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's a good question. So in my book, you will find a section where I discuss the scope of mandate of competition agency, and the discussion in this section of the book is not really about the goals of antitrust, whether there should be a kind of more classic consumer welfare, narrowly oriented or broader. It's this section of the book is more about competition agencies being given some new competencies that other than protection of competition, and I am so on one hand this is quite typical that I'm not sure about Chile, but in many countries you have competition agencies being at the same time consumer protection agencies, but these institutional models are different. And what in
Chile is different. In Chile is different. We have separate agencies. So we have a National Service for Consumer Protection, and we have an independent, another agency for competition. So it's different. So we are not following the FTC model in United States. So just for be clear,
Yeah. Thank you for this. I'm learning new things. Thank you. So what I discuss in my book is really the situation when competition agencies are given this other fields of responsibility, basically, and even beyond consumer protection, because I see that these two fields are interrelated, and if you have an agency that would be built in a proper way, that these two competition and consumer protection are not working really as a silos, but there is some exchange of knowledge, for example, exchange of experience. Maybe this is good for the agency, but the problem might become when a competition agency is given new responsibilities that are really different, and that in fact sometimes competition agency could be expected to deliver some goals that are related to protection of certain market players on the market. So for example, small and medium enterprises, or let's say farmers against the abuses coming from the buyers, like for example the supermarkets. I'm not saying that these are not the policies that state can decide to promote. What I'm saying in my book is that there may be a tension if you have an agency that is responsible for protecting competition, And then on the other hand, it is expected to deliver on other fronts, and for example, once the agency receives resources for these other areas, then you may see or you may observe a process of, in fact, a marginalization of importance of this competition mandate within the agency structure. So this is what I'm discussing, but I think your question is very interesting, and you are linking it to this broader debate we are having. But here I think the debate is more on the goals of competition law. So we have a competition agency that is responsible for protection of competition, but you ask yourself questions: what really this agency is now responsible for, and you're asking me, what if a competition agency is for example expected to kind of promote or protect democracy? So here I think we can have this debate, and maybe this debate is useful. I wouldn't describe a person that is raising these arguments, for example, in the US context, where I think really in recent years, in last like 20 years, really the role of antitrust diminished. Almost no cases, for example, under Section 2 of Sherman Act. So I really think that in the US they are going through this moment of kind of reconsideration, and they may be discussing certain things. The situation in Europe is different because in the EU competition law, because in the EU competition law, I think we never embraced this pure Chicago school in its extreme, only allocative efficiency focused way. There are other goals that are promoted by EU competition law, for example, such as integration of EU internal market. So you have this debate. What I find interesting is that I think you can ask yourself questions about the priorities. So what kind of cases really competition agencies should open? And I argue in the final section of my book that competition authorities should try to address within the powers they have and within the goals that are stated in the national law. And these goals can be different, like South Africa has, they have non-economic goals there, and you cannot say that the system is not working. I mean, probably it's not perfect, but the system is working. But the question is, even if you have, let's say, a narrow focused competition law that is focused on consumer law, you can still think what kind of cases you open. If you go after hub and spoke conspiracy concerning luxury watches, or you open a case against the cartel in which vast society, ordinary people were harmed. Maybe opening the second case, even if from intellectual perspective it would be less interesting, is something that competition agencies should prioritize. And maybe the last thing, when once you have this debate about possibly broadening of these goals, I think you can have this debate, but you need to make sure that if you introduce the changes into the existing law, you also will provide for a workable mechanism that will enable, for example, for balancing of these different goals. In this context, also independence for me of competition agencies is very important. So it's not only about adding these new goals and saying, okay, let's promote democracy, but really think, if a given jurisdiction opts for that, this should be done in a very, I would say, careful way, so that the competition law system and its functioning, and at the very end, competition law system will be about economy and not about democracy. Maybe you will have some cases that will be important for democracy as well, or sustainability. But it's you shouldn't by having this discussion. I think you need to be careful not to undermine the existing system that might have not been perfect, but has some achievements. And the problem with this, possibly with these other goals, is if this methodology, checks and balances, this framework is missing, there is a potential of abuse. So I think it would be, I think it's the question whether the decisions, for example, will be evidence-based, because it's quite easy to say, and I found it in Hungary. They introduced the system of exemptions to merger review system, and now the government can exempt any transaction from the scrutiny of the competition authority by saying it is in public interest. And if you look at this governmental decrees, you have one sentence. This is in public interest because something, but you don't really have any evidence. There, you may have a case, and there is no judicial review, nothing. So it's so you may have a beautifully framed other goal, but then the question is, what really checks and balances, what safeguards are there in the system that limit against abuse of this broad new terms that might be added to the competition law system. So maybe I'm not here fully clear, but I am, I am not saying that this is not the debate we shouldn't have, but I think we should be careful when we decide, for example, to reform a competition law. I don't know if this is something that is right now discussed in Chile, but yeah, but this is this needs to be done with a certain dose of carefulness, basically.
So I think it's really interesting. But what happened today? What happens today in the current discussion of in the European context of the DMA, so the Digital Market Act draft? Because we knew that 2 weeks ago they obtained a political consensus about many issues about the regulation of digital platforms. What do you think about these current scenarios for the perspective of the antitrust law? I mean, in a global context from Europe, because Europe is the current origin of the main reforms for digital economy. What do you think about it? And do you think that,
I think really EU is you could also see it in the field of data protection. That it seems that EU today establishes certain standards that, because of the importance of the US economy, can be becoming kind of a minimum standards that are also important for other jurisdictions. So about DMA, my book was not about the digital platforms. I think there is some importance of my book in relation to the discussion, but it wasn't about DMA, Digital Market Act. If you ask me about the question, what I think about the reform, it's I think it's my answer would be that it very much depends on how the system will really work. One could see that the adoption of DMA might signal that within the EU there was growing feeling that maybe competition law is too slow, is not, is maybe, I don't know, maybe too conservative for digital markets, if you think how you define markets, price as a very important indicator that is more difficult to be seen in a context of digital markets. So this idea for the DMA was born, and actually, if you open the DMA, the goal of the DMA seems to be different than of EU competition law. They are talking about contestability of the markets, for example. So it's like, because before you also asked me the question about this ex ante regulation. So if you think about the sectors like telecommunication, of energy, they also had the idea, okay, maybe competition law enforcement is not enough, but they were about bringing a greater competition to to certain sectors of economy where you have problems that cannot be cured, let's say, via competition law. In case of DMA, maybe to an extent this is followed, but you have this other goals. I think it's also about the thresholds, really, what companies will be covered by the DMA. We are really talking about only the biggest players, mostly US firms. So I think we need to wait how the system will work, how many cases European Commission will open, but we have this under Article 101, but mostly under 102. You have cases pending still, or they may be at different level, the judicial level or at the administrative level, against Google, Amazon, etc. So I don't think that there will be still a role for competition law, but the adoption of DMA may suggest that in the context of digital markets, you will have additional tools. You will have a regulation that will try to tackle certain specific problems that exist on digital markets.
Yes, of course. I think it's a really challenging discussion about this current scenario of the DMA for most of the European countries. So do we have time for one more question? So
I'm
okay.
fine.
That's okay. So how do you see, Maciej, the future of antitrust law in this current scenario of populism that you describe in the book? Could it be a more political and less microeconomic law? So what do you think is a real danger? And you think is how do you think about it? The future of antitrust law.
So I think I would come back to what I said earlier, that I think we need to distinguish between this debate about the goals of competition law and really the processes I am observing in countries like Poland and Hungary, but when I was thinking and looking for the examples from the past, really Venezuela was for me something I kind of couldn't believe, that you had maybe, again, not perfect agencies, but in the 90s it was working quite well. It had a very good reputation within the Latin America. This is my understanding, and then. You see this process actually didn't happen in 1 year. This is a process that takes place for several years, but you may end up with a situation when you don't have any more and really operating competition agency. This is, let's say, the darkest scenario. So in this context, if you think more about kind of the rise of authoritarian state and the crisis, the global crisis of liberal democracies, and kind of a growing role of maybe, let's put it that way, state capitalism. I think then the future of antitrust is quite grim. And it's not even so much about whether it will be economic driven or more political driven. We will simply not have a system, a competition law system in place that is acting as it should be. If you're asking me a more broader question about future of antitrust as such in the US, in Western Europe, I think we are going through the process that maybe this very narrowly oriented vision of competition law. I wouldn't like to say that it is over, but we will be going through a time where a certain reconsiderations or certain reforms are taking place. The question is really for me, and this is also why I'm so much interested in the institutional and procedural organization of a competition law system, how this will be really implemented. So if you keep on having independent competition agencies, if you keep on having a review by courts in place, if you keep on having experienced staff in the agency, if you continue to have sufficient resources for the for the competition agencies, etc. If you remember what I discuss in the final chapter of my book, if you take care about also the resilience of this competition law system, then we may be going through some change of paradigm, and you can, depending on maybe where you sit, you can be more critical or less critical. But I think then the future of antitrust, it will evolve. It will be maybe different, but it will be still there. But my book is more about kind of to make people think how to avoid this very dark scenario I discussed, where really the actual place for competition law system is not there anymore. And I think if you consider what make certain politicians win elections, those that maybe don't like liberal democracy so much, there were like economic concerns were also there. So from this perspective, thinking how competition law could address this societal challenges, and the world is changing. We are talking about the weather before we started. You have a climate change. This will really affect the society, and the society may vote for politicians that will very much kind of dislike this old system. So I think maybe we need to discuss how to make the system we have right now better to face the current challenges, because otherwise we might be risking a very revolutionary scenario that might be not perfect. In particular, if you think about the rise of kind of more authoritarian oriented governance.
So, Masek, it has been a really great conversation, and I really appreciate your time and generosity, and we look forward to having you here personally, physically, very soon in Chile. Please, I'd like to send a warm regard to your country, Poland. You have a great country with a great tradition and history, and especially a great and warm regard for the people of Eastern Europe during this difficult time.
Okay.
It's a great honor for us to having you here. And on behalf of our Department of Business Law, the Chair of Economic Law of Pontifical Catholic University of Valparaiso Law School, I would like to thank you and all of you for this connection. See you in the next time with another interesting guest and another activity. So good afternoon to everyone and buenas tardes. Muchas gracias a todos. Thank you very much, Masik. Thank you very much for all of you.
Buenas tardes. Muchas gracias a todos. Thank you.